8, but I still don't know what industries they were or what companies. And I'm sure that the person who presented the paper would know, but to my mind, it's a little bit too much interest in methodology and not sufficient in substance to be able to tell us actually what those industries were, because somebody did ask. So it seems that if we are really serious about diversification, and the clock is ticking, we all know that the energy sector cannot continue forever to sustain, to be the main driver of the economy. It is well known, well accepted, we have said it many times over. Then we have to think of what and in what manner and how it is possible to transform the economy to be less dependent on the energy sector. And in that context, it was mentioned last night that other economies, which we sometimes hold up as models like Singapore and others, have had a very authoritarian governments. They have not been democracies. That is certainly true of Singapore. That, as a matter of fact, when you look, that is true also of all those high growth economies of Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, Malaysia, and actually also true of Brazil when they had the miracle growth from 1964 to 1980. So we know that that is not an option. That is not where we want to go here. That's not where we're going to go here. But therefore, one has to ask if it, and those were all regimes which suppressed labor, which were really quite harsh, although they did deliver economic growth, and they did have sufficient national consensus to be able to deliver in some way to have a national legitimacy. So if in this society we are going to seriously address this problem of what happens when the hydrocarbon boom ends. Because, my first thought was, well, I said, maybe there'll never be diversification until it crashes. But that, I suggest, is something we really would not wish to see for all sorts of reasons. Because if that were to happen, we would have not just what happened in the 1980s, but it would be a great deal worse, and we'd certainly have the IMF. And not everyone in the IMF is as pleasant as Mr. Leon that we heard here. It would not be so nice at all. As a matter of fact, that is something one would not at all wish to contemplate in any way. So that has to be a social project. It has to be a national project. And that indirectly brings me to some comments about the panel on sustainable development. Incidentally, I think that this conference was wonderfully organized. The panels had great coherence, and everything was extremely important and useful. But I think I only want to make one comment on the very, very good and interesting presentations of various aspects of sustainable development. No, I want to make two comments. One of them pertains to poverty alleviation. I also heard your new Prime Minister talk about that in New York. I wasn't in New York, I saw it on the telly. But I am always a little troubled when people talk about the poor and what is to be done. Because it was actually our good friend, Dennis Pantin, I remember telling me after he had been to various countries in the region doing these poverty studies, and he said, nobody wants to be called poor. that is very true. But if one puts oneself in the situation of being destitute, of being in real trouble, so much you have to ask for some work, ask for some money, that is very humiliating. That makes a person feel shameful. Nobody wants to be called poor because poverty brings a stigma, a shame. But it is not a shame that should be on the people who are poor, but the shame is on a society that is as rich as this country is and that can tolerate poverty at all. Never mind 16%, 1% is too much. So if we are to have a society here that is capable of the sort of cooperation between the private sector, the government, the different political parties and groups or whatever, in order to envisage a plan, a way forward, and toward a more diversified economy, and I may also say toward a better use of our natural resources, and come to that in a moment, if I may, then we have to understand that it is impossible to build a stable, functioning, sustainable economy on a society that is rich and tolerates poverty to the degree that we do here. And it is also very difficult in a society where incomes become increasingly unfair, increasingly different. And of course, I'm no expert on crime, but it's very clear that crime has got a great deal to do with income inequality, really not with poverty. Poor people are not criminal, and nor does poverty induce crime, but inequality and injustice and resentment and aspirations which are not attainable, all of that we know do. And that situation is one of the big problems, among others. And that brings me to the issues of infrastructure and other kinds of, and competitiveness. Yes, I've heard a lot about competitive. It is very important to be competitive. And then the discourse goes into all the things that should be done in order to make us here more competitive, dealing with certain problems, attitude to work, traffic congestion, crime. But it occurs to me that all these problems should have to be addressed. But why do we address them only in the context of making us internationally competitive? Are they not to be addressed on their own account? Are they not to be addressed for the well-being of the people that live here? Because, it is only countries that begin by approaching the problems of the people that live there that ultimately develop that coherence and that energy that also become internationally very competitive. So I think it has to begin by looking at inside, if you wish, particularly with respect to the social conditions. I was very, very taken by the last panel on the cultural industries. I learned a great deal. I would like to see the papers. There was so much information, I couldn't possibly take it in just by listening. But I did think, because I live in Montreal, and we have developed a lot of cultural industries there. And perhaps the best known of them is a circus called the Cirque du Soleil. I don't know if anybody ever heard of them? Yes. Well, the origin of the Cirque du Soleil were two characters that did a street theater downtown by the port, by the old port in Montreal. They were quite well known. And the thing started as street theater, and it went from the very critical, I may say, with social comment and so on, and one thing and another, but they developed this circus that was to be different because no animals, only dancers and people. And, well, it became world famous. But it's, and I am sure, I know that this is a country that has got that base from which cultural products arise. I'm not going to go into any more detail. But surely the first audience, as it is in Montreal, the first audience of cultural product is the population of the city. It's not that these things are done for the foreigners that come. They are done for the people that live there, as your carnival is here. And so I think that the whole issue of the improvement of infrastructure, issues of course of security, issues and other issues should be targeted at the welfare of the population of the country. And then the country will increase its competitiveness and will succeed abroad. And this is not, I'm not saying this dismissing the openings to the foreign markets. In fact, I think that Trinidad is very well placed, and the cultural diversity, which is extraordinary here, should also be of assistance in making newer and deeper links with the world, from China right around the globe, back to China, wherever. So I would just like to say how valuable I think was this conference, how much I have enjoyed it, and I just wish you great success and hope to come back every year until such time as I might come to live here. Thank you.